Who was that young woman with the radiant smile who, from a quiet corner of Argentina, ignited the faith of thousands of hearts? One day, that inner whisper, the one only the brave dare to hear, spoke to her heart. A voice within her soul proclaimed these words, "Come and follow me." Before continuing with her story, I want us to listen to something truly special, something that will inspire you and help you understand the mystery of her calling. To step into her place, open your heart, and perhaps, for the first time, hear the voice of God, because there's something in her message, in the way she speaks about how she discovered her vocation, that goes beyond the human. They are not just memories, it's a testimony that radiates peace, faith, and a tenderness that can only come from above. Listening to her is like gazing into the mystery of a soul that learned to love without limits. So before we go on with her life story, I invite you to open your heart and let yourself be touched by the simplicity and depth of someone who found her true joy.
Some may wonder how a person, a woman, could ever decide to become a nun, a discalced Carmelite, cloistered no less, one of those who live enclosed. What could have gone through her mind and her heart to make such a decision? To my parents, my brothers, my grandmother, my relatives, and my friends, I try to explain it, with all the knowledge I had, and even the knowledge I didn't. After 10 years as a Carmelite, I dare to tell you, all stories of God's call are wonderful. It's like when we climb a mountain. We discover landscapes so unique, so deeply imprinted in us, that no matter how many great photos we take, it's never the same showing them to others as it is having lived them. No matter how much we try to tell, a thousand shades will always remain between the soul and God. Since I was a child, I dreamed of getting married. At other ages, I used to think either a nun or married, never single. At 15, I was deeply in love with a boy, but the Lord always stopped me short, always making me long for something more, something I couldn't quite name. Just to make you smile, in my last year of high school, I had already chosen the chapel for my wedding, even though the main ingredient was still missing. God used a theology teacher who, through his classes, made everything speak to me of God. Everything he said awakened in me a longing for heaven. I started going to Mass every day. I went with a friend, and we always met up with others afterward. I was overjoyed that there were so many of us going. I began to take moments for personal prayer, to pray the rosary, which at the time I found terribly boring. But I wanted to love the Virgin. That same professor introduced us to Saint Teresa of Jesus, the one from Avila. I was captivated by her intimacy with Christ because in her book of her life, even though I didn't know how to pray, she taught me to pray along with her. She made me look at Christ. She taught me what prayer is. In her own words, mental prayer, in my opinion, is nothing else than an intimate sharing between friends. It means taking time frequently to be alone with Him, who we know loves us. And there was another phrase of hers that I loved, that to be with the good Jesus, there's no need to overthink or exhaust the mind. He is not a friend of those who get tangled in their own thoughts. He delights only in our affection and company. A friend and I used to dream of traveling to Europe. Once, we even played the lottery, maybe hoping for a miracle win. Sensing my dreams, my grandmother invited me to travel that year to the old continent and paid for a tour. There was no way I would skip going to Avila, even if it wasn't part of the itinerary. I had to go where Saint Teresa lived, the mother of the Discalced Carmel. But at that point, becoming a nun hadn't even crossed my mind. It was December 31st. Some friends offered to take me with them. First, we were going to Segovia. I didn't know that St. John of the Cross, father of the Carmelite order, was buried there. When I accidentally saw the sign, I begged them to let me get out and take some photos. And there, over his tomb, I prayed with all the fervor and anxiety of my soul, asking God to give me clarity about my vocation. But honestly, I didn't feel any response at that moment. When we arrived in Avila, it was 6 in the evening, in the middle of winter, almost dark. We went to the Monastery of the Incarnation, where I ran into some girls who were in charge of the museum and were returning the keys to the nuns. The porter, seeing my distress, gestured for me to follow them. We entered a place made entirely of stone because the building is very old, from the early 1500s. It was freezing, and they spoke through a wooden screen. Later I learned it's called a turn, with a very sweet little nun, but she couldn't be seen, only heard. I asked the girls to please ask her to stay because I wanted to speak with her. For me, it felt as if I had spoken with Saint Teresa herself. I just started to cry and cry. The two friends who came in with me left me alone. The little nun, whose name was Teresa of Jesus, told me that she saw in me a vocation as clear as water, and that I shouldn't expect an angel to whisper it in my ear. Inside, while I was crying, I felt the infinite love of God offered to me completely. It was like suddenly realizing all the love a person who truly cares for you has for you, but more than you could ever imagine, so much. I felt very small and even a little embarrassed to be loved in that way. Yet at the same time, I felt an immense, sweet happiness, one of those feelings that words cannot describe. Now, with the passage of time, was I become increasingly aware of my flaws and limitations, and of how little I knew myself. The love of God impresses me even more. That God would love me so much, just as I am. Even with all these signs and graces from God, I confessed that they weren't enough to make me feel completely secure. I enrolled in speech therapy, praying I wouldn't pass. Later, I switched to literature. Despite my doubts and insecurities, I never questioned whether to be an active or contemplative religious. I wanted to belong to the Virgin, and I was told that the Carmelite order belongs entirely to Mary and Saint Teresa. Finally, I entered the Carmelite monastery in Buenos Aires. I stayed 5 months. I liked the life, but I didn't feel like I belonged there. With all the pain and darkness in my soul, I left thinking that the Carmelite life had been my own illusion, not a true call from God. But despite all my efforts, I couldn't get the Carmelite life out of my mind. Meanwhile, the night began to clear, and through all the suffering, peace came to my soul. The Lord clothed me with strength and granted me the serene, unwavering certainty of His call. This dark night lasted only 3 months, but my wait to reach safe harbor lasted 3 years. With this certainty in my soul, I went to knock on the doors of the Carmelite monastery in Santa Fe, the place I had always felt drawn to. From what I had heard, I was attracted to its poverty, radical simplicity, and joy, but above all, the Lord made me desire it. My parents asked me to study and finish a degree before entering. The sisters also thought it was wiser, and my spiritual father advised obedience to my parents' wishes. It was another gift from God to study nursing and be at the bedside of so many dying and sick people. Just to be sure, every year I returned to knock on the doors in case I changed my mind. My obedience wasn't perfect. During this wait, my entire song was a poem written by Cardinal Newman before his conversion. Take me you, take me you. In dense dark night, I am far from home. Take me you, take me you. I do not ask to see the edges or horizons. Just one more step is enough for me until the night fades. until at last the angel's smile bursts forth, the one I lost, the one I have longed for always, take me you. Finally, I earned my diploma, and on December 8th, the Virgin received me into her home. Our sweetest Jesus has gifted me perseverance over these years and a profound joy, despite my poverty, of belonging entirely to Him, of being His bride, of being able to help Him in my smallness, to save souls through His passion, to assist His ministers, priests, the Holy Father, and the Church, which journeys in Santa Fe, Argentina, and to our poor and suffering homeland. Now, Saint Teresa Benedicta of the Cross, another great Carmelite saint, would tell me, "You are not a doctor or a nurse, nor can you bandage their wounds. You are secluded in your cell and cannot go to them. You hear the agonizing cries of the dying and wish you were a priest. There by their side, look to the crucified. United with Him, you are like the omnipresence. Through the power of the cross, you can be on every front in all places of affliction. I hope you forgive me if I have not expressed everything in fewer words. Let these words serve as my act of gratitude, starting with my great-grandmother Josefina, to the dear mothers of the Incarnation, to priests and friends, especially my parents, siblings, and the mothers and sisters of this community that God gave me. This was a fragment of her life testimony where her vocation prevailed in response to God's call. He was patient with her.
This was the testimony of Cecilia María. On December 8, 1997, she entered the Carmelite monastery of Santa Fe. She took the name Sister Cecilia María of the Holy Face. From that moment, her life became a silent song of faith, hope, and joy. Her sisters say that her joy was contagious, that her smile had something inexplicable, as if her heart was always looking toward heaven. She lived each day with tenderness and dedication, praying for the whole world. But one day, the mystery of the cross touched her life. She was diagnosed with aggressive cancer of the tongue and throat, a cruel disease, yet on her face there was no fear, only peace. "I offer everything out of love," she would say. Her suffering did not separate her from God. It drew her closer to Him. Her sisters remember that even on the hardest days, she smiled. That very smile, captured in a photograph shortly before her passing, moved the entire world, a smile that seemed to come straight from heaven. On June 24, 2016, at the age of 42, Cecilia María passed to meet the Lord. Those who were with her recount that in that moment, her room was filled with the fragrance of roses, as if heaven itself was confirming the invisible beauty of her soul. But her story did not end there. Her testimony began to spread like an unextinguishable flame. Thousands of people started to learn about her, ask for her intercession, and find comfort in her example. Today, the Church has officially begun the process for her beatification and canonization. Her life is being studied, her virtues recognized, and her legacy continues to grow. Because the world needs saints who smile even in the midst of suffering. She teaches us that true happiness is not the absence of pain, but making each suffering an offering, each tear a prayer. Her final wish was simple and beautiful, that her funeral be a celebration, and so it was. For those who live in Christ, die in joy. Today, her smile still speaks to us. It reminds us that nothing is lost if we still love, that every cross can be transformed into light, and that saints are not born perfect. They are born when they choose to trust. If this story touched your heart, subscribe and join us to discover more testimonies that strengthen faith and renew the soul, because the love of God can turn even the greatest pain into an eternal smile.